Hi, welcome to the 2020 Nottingham International Film Festival. We are delighted to be joined by Frederick Marx, all the way from the not as sunny as it was California. How are you doing, Frederick?
Doing great, yeah.
And you made it. So you said we were just talking before the interview, and you were saying it's thankfully everything's settling down a little bit in California now in terms of wildfires and things.
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, you probably saw those photographs of San Francisco where the sun didn't rise. That was about 4 or 5 days after my girlfriend and I left on our third COVID breakout trip. This one was across the country, 9,500 miles in about 63 days.
Wow.
We're obviously doing everything that we need to do to take precautions to be safe on the road, but at the same time, to me, it seems like a very good time to be out on the road. We've spent half of the last year in national and state parks across the United States.
Wow.
And to me, that is extremely important because, it reminds me of how these mountains and these trees and rivers and lakes, were here long before humans walked on the planet, and they'll be here long after COVID is a forgotten memory.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's been heartening for me.
Fantastic. And obviously the outdoors is something that's incredibly important to you, and it's something obviously an integral part of this film. Tell us a bit about the film and what sort of brought you into this world, I suppose.
Well, there's two different streams that fed into this one river. One was that in 2005, I was invited to a weekend workshop outside of Houston, Texas, called Veterans Journey Home. And that's where I stole the name. And we basically produced a little online video to support that organization. And in fact, it's still there on their website today. And that experience opened my mind and heart to the suffering of veterans. A lot of the participants were Vietnam veterans who many, for 30, 35 years, were still carrying the ghosts of war. And I saw the incredible transformation that they experienced in only a 48-hour period. So that really started me thinking about the depth and breadth of the needs for veterans and what can be done to support them. Now, the second stream is a product of my 20 years work in rites of passage. And I started out initially interested in teen boys and what it takes for them to matriculate into mature masculinity, into an effectively positive young adulthood. So that led me to investigate and research initiation across the world and many different cultures. This was a common feature of society, indigenous societies, for thousands of years on the planet. There's an African proverb that says, if we do not initiate the young, they will burn down the village to feel the heat. So at any rate, those studies started with boys, then it grew into teens in general, boys and girls, and now it's grown even further. And my newest book is about all of the major life transitions that the average human goes through from birth to death, and all of the different rites of passage that need to be accomplished in order for us to realize our full wholeness as human beings. So I realized that veterans are basically stuck in the middle of a rite of passage, that they are given initiation, if you will, by the military. And unlike civilian society, they're taught some amazingly positive values. They're taught about service, that their life actually needs to be subordinate to the collective, which is something that at least in the United States, 95% of the public desperately needs to learn that lesson. They're also taught about mission, that there's a sense that every life needs to be directed by a deep sense of purpose. Now, obviously, that mission in the military is to serve governmental and military ends. But the idea of serving a mission is not a bad one in and of itself. In fact, it's an essential one. And returning veterans need to supplant that governmental mission, if you will, with a personal mission, something that comes out of their lived experience as human beings. And that can direct the remainder of their lives going forward. So, and then there's also the sense of teamwork and camaraderie. That's something that's essential to what the military are taught in basic training. So at any rate, they learn all these wonderful things, but then they go and they serve. And then when they come back, they're just simply given a handshake and a thank you for your service. And now, you know, they're dismissed in effect. And that is leaving them in the middle of a rite of passage that is not complete. And so part of my purpose with this film, and in fact, it's part of a 5-film series that's almost complete now, all 5 films, is to impress upon average civilians that we have a responsibility to these people, that when they go off and they serve in our name, regardless of whether we approve of the military adventure or not, that we have a responsibility to receive them in ways that are compassionate and ways that we can witness them empathetically so that they can basically decompress and unwind all of what it is that they've experienced, and to be held by the collective so that symbolically whatever psychic and emotional burdens they are carrying get lifted off of their shoulders and put on our shoulders as collective citizens. So this is what the whole series is about. And we highlight these different, what you might call healing or returning modalities that are all very different. And I'm agnostic. I don't have any particular care for one over the other, but they're effective and they do not require medicalization of the problem, pathologizing the problem, saying that they have some PTSD, they have a disorder. No, the problem is in society and we don't know how to receive these veterans. So that's what the series is about.
Do you think there was just having sort of listening to what you've been saying, do you think there was a difference in the way the veterans were received back into society, say at the end of the Second World War, compared to the way veterans are welcomed back into society now? Because you don't see quite the same, don't get me wrong, the people coming back from the Second World War, they had deep-seated trauma that they'd experienced when they were there, but it didn't seem to be something that they kept for life when they didn't seem to respond in the same way that these modern veterans do. And is that due to everyone was happy to have them home and everyone respected what they'd done?
Yes, it's true and it's not true. It's true in the sense that society definitely welcomed them with open arms. There were parades, there were hugs and kisses from strangers in the street. There was no question about the depth and the breadth of that reacceptance back into society. And there's another key difference too. At least in the United States, those returning veterans from World War II had 2 to 3 weeks to be among their peers as they were on ships coming home, so that they had plenty of time to share with their peers all of the horror and offload much of that, the depth of that experience with their contemporaries, so that by the time they reached home, they already decompressed quite a bit. Nowadays, you're lifted by helicopter, put on a jet, and you're home in your living room 24 hours after you've been shooting out in Iraq or Afghanistan or something. And that is totally ineffective. So that's true to one degree, but to another degree, it's not true, because a lot of World War II veterans carried with them a lifetime of repressed trauma, basically. And then what happens, of course, is they act that out on all their loved ones in their immediate vicinity. And so there's more domestic violence, there's drug and alcohol abuse, there's more unemployment, there's homelessness, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, what I'm trying to do is, again, awaken everybody to the fact that, there are these models that have worked perfectly well for indigenous societies around the globe. Just to take one, the Lakota people, the Native Americans, in the Plains Indians of South Dakota in the United States, they used to sequester their returning warriors in a separate village for up to 3 months, where they could be alone and do rituals of grieving and rituals of processing before they were re-allowed back into the village. So these are the kinds of models that we need to draw on when we work with veterans today.
And so in the US, what is the sort of, once they are discharged, is there no duty of care of the military of them at all after that? Is that just, you're not our responsibility anymore?
Well, it depends on the branch of service, but many different branches of service offer at most 1 week of training. But the training is not the psychic, emotional training that is needed. It's all logistical training of how to open a bank account, how to go look for a job, how to access VA services, Veterans Affairs services, and medical care, et cetera, et cetera. So, the response often boils down to, well, you have PTSD, my friend, and here's some meds, take these and go away. And that, for me, in my experience of working with veterans, becomes the first threshold of them on their journey to healing, back to wholeness, is they have to basically put those meds aside, which literally turn them into zombies, many of them. And just sort of stupefy them in order to basically begin to awaken to their own feelings. And then they go on from there. There's various stages of growth that are necessary.
And we witness this in the film, and some of the moments with the veterans in the film are incredibly powerful when we see them going through this. So what, in terms of the films beyond this, where do the sort of 4 films you've created beyond this film, where do they take us in terms of the journey?
Well, they're all differing lengths and they're all different styles. But the film that is kind of the headline banner, if you will, of the series is called Solutions. It's only 15 minutes long. And basically, it's mostly talking heads, frankly, and it's all of the people who I've learned about these issues from. So it's Dr. Ed Tick, it's Dr. Jonathan Shea. I mean, these brilliant people who've been working with veterans for 30, 40 years who have written extensively about these issues. So that's the first film, which in a sense lays the philosophical grounding for the entire series. And then the other 4 films, in a sense, highlight these different, again, I call them healing modalities, but it's only a shorthand term because the problem ultimately lies with civilian culture and civilian society. It's not about the veterans. But at any rate, so Leaving It on the Land obviously highlights a kind of a Native American style vision quest ceremony, which actually is not based on Native American style, but it's a kind of a combination of indigenous practices from around the world, where people spend a period of time on the land, fasting, alone, in a sense, in prayer for a revitalized understanding of their own lives. Now, briefly, the other 3 films, one is 22 women veterans experiencing a 4-month meditation and mindfulness-based instruction period. So that's becomes their healing modality, if you will. Another one basically alludes to workshops like Veterans Journey Home, where I began this journey, 48-hour weekend workshop where veterans come in, they get into supportive circles, and they gain enough trust and security to eventually tell their stories and unfold and unpack their trauma. And there's more. So those are really what the remainder of the films are about.
Okay, brilliant. And is there somewhere people can go to find these films, to check these out, or are they to be released?
Yes. Well, we're in the process of trying to get them distributed now. We're reaching out to all the usual suspects, Netflix, Amazon, HBO, etc. But, and the last two films are almost done, but not yet done. So the first three films, Leaving It on the Land is one. The best place to go is to our website, warriorfilms.org, pretty simple. And we have a Veterans Journey homepage. And not only can you find information about the films, but also follow-up stories. So for example, our veterans in Leaving It on the Land, you can read about what's been happening to them since May of 2018, when we filmed them doing this ritual.
Fantastic. Right, brilliant. Well, I mean, I definitely advise everyone, if they've enjoyed the film or if they've just stumbled across this interview, definitely check out the website and you can follow the story. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic film. Encourage people to check it out, and I wish it the best of luck in the future.
Well, thanks so much. You know, it's a pleasure for us to be in Nottingham, so appreciate the invitation.